Okay, we'll get started. All right, so welcome everyone. This is Security Evaluation Methodologies. I'm Jeremy. You can call me Jeremy, it's fine. If you're not comfortable with that, Professor Clark, Dr. Clark is good. The Moodle, everyone should have access to. Has anyone checked? Yeah, okay, so no problem there. All right, so what we'll do is in the first class, the first half of the class, I'm just going to go through the course outline and all of that type of stuff, talk about the project, and then we'll take a break, and then I'll give you a short lecture, like a half class lecture on the opening stuff. Okay, so maybe to start, we'll just go through the course outline. You've probably seen these a million times, but anyways. Okay, so office hours for this class will be virtual, it'll be on Zoom. It will be at 2 o'clock on Thursdays. The Zoom link is here. Office hours are drop-in, so you don't have to tell me ahead of time that you're coming. You don't have to send me an email or anything like that. I'll just fire up Zoom at 2, and if people are there waiting, I'll bring you in one at a time. So when you log in, you'll either see you're in a waiting room, that means someone else I'm talking to, and I'll get to you eventually. And if you see like waiting for host to start call, that means I'm not on the call yet. Sometimes I forget. I have it in my calendar, so I tried my hardest not to. But if you do see that and you think, give me like 5 minutes, but I'm not on, then just send me an email and I'll either join or we can arrange a different time or whatever. Okay. Now that said, most students, when you have a question, you can just email me. That's probably better anyways, unless if it's something that requires a lot of back and forth. I'm also happy to chat during the break and after class as well. Okay, so there's lots of times to come, and so office hours isn't like your only access to me. If that time doesn't work for you and you do need to talk to me out of class, you can also drop me an email and we can chat as well. Okay, so I'm flexible. The other thing is I won't hang around on office hours. So if I join and in 10 minutes, like everyone's done, I'm just going to leave as well. So try and get there right at 2 or between 2 and 2:10 if you need the office hours. Again, like last semester, I think maybe like 2 people came to office hours the full term. So yeah, you can also message me on Moodle. That's another option. Okay, I'll go through the course a bit when we go into the lecture. I'll try and give you an overview of what the course is and what it's about. So I won't detail that now, but I'll just note that there's no prerequisites or co-requisites or anything like that. So you should be able to take this course. You don't have to have taken any other of the courses on the security side. If you're in quality, that's fine too. Every year we have students from quality. Sometimes the quality students maybe have to do a little bit of more background reading, or I might skip over things, but anyways, that would be the only impediment to doing it. So it says here, actually, you should prepare yourself to do background research, but other than that, it shouldn't be a problem. Students are usually worried about like how much coding is there in the course, and it's almost nothing. There might be like little snippets of code that we'll go through just to understand the principle behind things, but you don't have to code. If you want to code, though, you'll have a project, which I'll talk about, and that's an opportunity for you to code, but you don't have to code for the project either. Okay, there's no required textbooks or anything like that. All the exam questions and the assignments will be based on the course material, the lectures themselves. The lectures I'm recording, so I'm recording as we speak, just my screen, and then I'll post that on YouTube. So if you miss a class, then you can go on Moodle maybe the day after class, or maybe Monday because it's a Friday class, and I should have the video up, and then you can watch the video and see. The videos from last term, I think, are still linked to Moodle. So if you want to see what that looks like, you can see it. You can even watch them ahead of time if you're really ambitious. Although this year I'm going to change the order around, but other than that, the lectures will be the same. Yeah, so anyway, so everything is just based on the lecture notes. Now, in order to create the lectures, I did read textbooks. So, for example, we'll have 2 lectures on social engineering. I read an entire textbook just to prepare those 2 lectures, but I'm not going to require you to read the textbook, okay? But that's the kind of thing that if you were like, oh, I didn't quite get what he was saying, then that would be like a fuller explanation that you could turn to. So for that reason, on the Moodle, you'll see that I have lots of links to a bunch of other stuff. You know, sometimes they're books, sometimes they're papers, sometimes they're articles. So there are a bunch of resources that you can read. So none of these are required, unless if I say that they're required in the lecture. But basically, you don't have to read anything in addition to just, you know, attending the lectures themselves. But if you want more background information on things, it will help you. Okay, the grading scheme is pretty standard. The main thing about this class is there's no midterm, so it'll be just the final exam. And then you'll have 2 assignments and you'll have a project. The final exam, while we're talking about it, I might as well mention it now. There's a bit of text down here. Okay, so the final exam will be in the exam period. We won't have it in class. There'll be an actual exam scheduled in the exam period. I don't choose the date or the time or anything about the exam. That's chosen by the university. So I don't control that. So what that means is the exam could be scheduled anywhere between April 15th and, it's weird, it usually says when exams end. Maybe it will spill into June. Huh, that's unusual. Usually they have an explicit end date for exams as well. But anyways, you can email them or something and ask. But this is for graduates. Yeah, okay. Anyways, so if you're making travel plans, that kind of thing, booking airline tickets, wait until they've announced at least the preliminary schedule, so you get a tentative schedule, and then it usually never changes. The only reason it would change after the tentative is because there was a student that had a conflict with the exam time. And what they tend to do is they tend to put the exam at the same time as the course itself. So since we're a Friday night, you can expect an exam Friday night as well. And they know that you can't be in 2 courses at once on Friday night, so you probably aren't going to have 2 exams on Friday night as well. So usually the preliminary schedule is okay. All right. Let me just see if there's anything else about the exam. So the exam I'll talk about, you know, way later in it. But if you've yeah. So anyways, it will be an in-person exam. You'll have 3 hours to write it. I don't do long exams, so it'd be more like a 2-hour exam or something like that, but you can take all 3 hours. It'll be short answer, true, false, multiple choice questions. Multiple choice you'll do on a Scantron form. You can bring a cheat sheet with you. You can write anything you want on it. So none of the questions I ask you will be based on memorization. Okay, so anything you're worried about forgetting, you can just write on your sheet. You can bring it. You can make copies of the lecture notes. You can do whatever you want. It can be as small as you want. You can bring a magnifying glass. It doesn't matter. Yeah, if English isn't your first language, you can bring a dictionary. If you want a calculator, you can bring it, but you won't need it. And yeah, so these, I'll go over all these details probably the two weeks before the exam or a week before the exam when you are concerned about it more. But anyways, it's there if you need it. And yeah, the main thing just now is wait for the schedule to be posted. It will be posted here so you can see what it looks like from last term. But eventually it will get posted here. I don't know when they post it. I think it would be probably in February, mid-February, maybe later February, based on previous years when you'll see it. Okay, the project I'll spend some time talking about. The first assignment you can't do until next class anyways. Maybe, yeah, I think after next class you would be able to do it. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. And so I'll talk about assignment 1 a little later. The due dates for them, you can read the assignments and the due dates are here. So the February 5th will be assignment 1 and March 12th will be assignment 2. Your grades themselves, so you'll get a letter grade at the end. There's no standard mapping between like this is the grade that gets you an A plus or this is the grade that gives you an A. Usually for most courses in Concordia, it's based on your rank in the class. So I'll compute your mark according to this scheme. Then I'll have a ranking of students, and then grades are sort of assigned, with some constraints in place, but there's also a bit of flexibility in terms of how they're assigned. At the very end of the course, if you want to, so you'll get your grades on the first 2 assignments, but that's only like 20% of your mark. The projects and the final exams will be after classes end. So if you want your grades after, you can just send me an email and say, can I have a breakdown of my grades? And then I'll tell you what the percentages are. And then if you want to check too, you can also check your final exam and those kinds of things. But that would be after the term is over. And sometimes students aren't happy with their mark and they say, can I do an extra assignment or can I do something to boost my grade? And so I'll just say like we don't allow it. The reason we don't allow it is just because I think every student will want to boost their grade. And so it's not fair, or at least we should extend the option to all students, but then it just becomes another component of the course. So at some point you have to draw a line in the sand and say that your grade is based on this course material. So that's that. Okay, this is actually slightly out of date, so I shuffled a few things around. But anyways, we'll cover the exact same material, just be a slightly different order. And I may still make some shuffles to the order still. I'm trying to play with it. The main motivation for that is assignment 2 was always really late in the course because you need to watch certain lectures before you started it. And it takes the TA a really long time to mark because it's not hard for you to do, I don't think, but it is a lot of writing, or like it ends up being a lot of reading for the TA, and they have to think about what you said because every student's going to do it slightly different. And so grades weren't coming in early enough. So anyway, so that's why I pushed the usability material up in the course so that we can give that assignment out earlier, and then we can get your grades back to you sooner. Any other information you need about on-campus resources are here. And yeah, okay, so that's basically what I wanted to say. Are there questions about the course material? Any concerns? Don't be shy. It's always the next person to talk will be the first student to have talked in this whole course. So it could be you. You could ask. You could be the first student. Yeah. Perfect. Congrats.
I want to know how it's gonna be like for quality system, students. It's gonna be like, is it easier for them to adapt for this course? Or?
Okay, so the course is a lot of concepts, and the concepts will be unfamiliar, I think, to both security students. Like I try and touch things that are new and aren't covered in the other security courses, right? So if you know a lot about security, you'll be interested in the course, but it won't necessarily give you kind of a leg up, I think. It will just, so the short end is like a quality student should do as well as a security student. It's just that there might be like small things that I kind of skip over, or I like just throw a term and I don't define it. And so those are the kinds of things where you might have to look it up. Especially if you're not coming from a computer science undergrad. If you did computer science in undergrad, you probably have seen everything anyways. So that might be the issue, but every year I have tons of quality students and they all do well. I should say they all do well. They do as well as everyone else. It's not like they're doing really badly compared to the rest. Yeah. So if you're in quality, don't be intimidated by the course. And of all the security courses to take, I would say that this is maybe one of the friendliest to quality students. But, yeah.
I have a question about the project? Is it going to be a group project or an individual project?
Okay, so the project I'll talk about next.
Oh.
So just hold your thought. I'll go through all those details. Yeah. Any questions besides the project? Yeah.
The final exam, do you bring anything outside from the lecture slides, like things you mentioned in the class?
Right. So I should say exam questions are based on the lectures. So there's not going to be anything like any of these additional resources or anything like that. I'm not going to like ask you some question about this article that I didn't cover in the lecture. But it could definitely be based on something I said that I didn't necessarily write on the lecture slide itself. So the slides, I try to make them comprehensive and include details, but a lot of times it might be a picture, like I'm showing, oh, this goes here and here, and then I'm kind of walking you through. But if you were just looking at the slide, you might miss the sort of the story behind it. So anyways, it's very important that you actually watch the lectures and not just skim the slides, or come to class. But yeah, so it will be based on the lectures, most of which should be reflected on the lecture slides itself, but it could be something I say. Yeah.
Before my question, I just want to say that I've heard a lot about you.
Yeah.
And like good things only.
That
This degree would be wasted if I don't take your course. Like I've heard that much. So to get the most out of this course, what does a student needs to do? Like I just wanted to ask that.
Yeah, sure. So the main thing is like make sure you really understand everything, like the concepts, especially the examples. Like make sure you understand like what's going on, and like you could explain it to someone else, or someone asks you questions, and or variants like, oh, if I didn't do that one little step, how would that change the whole thing? Those are the kinds of things I'm going to ask you on an exam, right? It'll be like, okay, here's the thing that we did in class. Now, what if you did this instead, right? And so you can't answer that unless if you you're really comfortable with what was done. Then you can open your mind to like alternatives and things like that. But yeah, the main thing is just be really comfortable with the material. And if you're uncomfortable, ask me questions, and then I'll explain it. Go. Okay. Anything else? Great. And you get an A+ for saying that that you're just taking the course because of me. Okay, so I'll move on to the project then. So this is on Moodle too. I posted it like an hour ago, so you might not have seen it before. Okay, I'll just sort of go through it. Okay, so the project's going to be a written report. So it'll be a PDF, and you hand in the PDF, and that's it. There's no other component to it. It's an open topic. So you can do your project on anything, and you need to choose it. Okay? So you'll choose your project to do, and it will be on that. What I'd like to see are one of two kinds of projects. One is you could try to do something novel, something that no one's done before, like design a new system or propose something new or something like that. So that would be candidate A. Most students don't do that. The ones that do tend to be maybe like in the PhD program or in the thesis-based masters or something like that. So if that's you, you should actually think about like, could I do a course project that could ultimately be published? But otherwise, most students opt for what I call a systemization of knowledge, which is just a fancy way of saying that you pick a security topic and you talk about it, okay? And I'm going to go through lots of details of what I'm expecting beyond that. Okay, so in order to qualify for this course is about security evaluation. So we haven't really talked about what that is, but it's not that hard of a concept to understand. It just means, why is something secure, right? And before you answer why, you should actually answer, what does it even mean to be secure, right? And so what it means to be secure might be different depending on what you're talking about. All right, it will be different depending on what you're talking about. So whatever your security topic is, or whatever your topic is, it should relate to security, but you should also spend a bit of time talking about when we say this thing is secure, what exactly do we mean? Okay? And then how do we figure out that this thing actually meets those definitions? Okay, so as long as that's a component, it doesn't have to be the full topic of your project, okay? But it needs to be in there somewhere, then it's acceptable for this course, okay? So in general, you can do a topic on anything you want. You have to think about it from a security perspective. And then what I require just beyond that is just that you think about what security means and how would you figure out, whether it's in theory or in practice, how do people actually figure it out, or what you could do in theory to tell whether it actually is secure or not, according to what it's supposed to be. Okay. All right. So we'll go through some of the nitty-gritty details. Okay. So the first thing is to answer the question, you can do it individual. You can do it in 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. If you want to do it in more than 4 people, I'm also open to it, but just come talk to me and tell me why you need more than 4 people, and then I'll think about it and either say yes or no, but probably yes. Okay. Now that said, I do expect more from projects that have more members. Okay. So I do explicitly consider it when I'm grading. And you know, some years there might be a project that is really, really good, but there were 4 people on it. And I have other projects where there was only 1 person and basically the sort of the content is the same, right? Like, you know, and so if you want to use more than 1 person, you need to increase the quality or the attention to detail or whatever it means for your particular project, okay? So I will consider that. That said, every year, the top projects in the class, some of them come from individuals, some of them come from groups of 4, some of them come from 2 or 3. So there's no reason you shouldn't avoid what you want to do saying, oh, it's going to be hard as a group of 4 to get a good mark, or it's going to be hard as just me working alone getting a mark. You can get a good mark in any of those situations. Okay, so do whatever is natural. If you know other people and you want to collaborate with them, don't let that hold you back. And if you don't know anyone or you want to do something yourself or you can't find people that are interested in your topic, then go just do it individual and it shouldn't be a problem. Reports are limited to 8 pages. That's just because I have to read them all. And usually that's like at the end of class when I'm also marking exams and everyone wants their marks quickly. And so to make my life sane, I limit it to 8 pages. That said, if you're 8.5, you're not going to lose marks. If you're 9 or 10, or let's say you're 10, just shoot me an email and say, I'm having a hard time trimming this to 8. Can I do 10? And I'll probably say yes. Okay, so I am flexible, but I just don't want every student to hand in 12 or 16 pages because then it will get hard to mark. You can use any template you want. I don't care, any normal template. You don't need a title page. It could just be title. Make sure your name and all the names of all the people are on it and all the student numbers, and then you're good to go. You can just launch into the paper itself. If you want to make it look more like an academic paper, you can use, a lot of conferences will have a template that you can use. So like IEEE or ACM or Lecture Notes of Computer Science, they all have templates. Sometimes they're in Word, sometimes they're in something called LaTeX. And so you're free to do whatever you want. If you're using LaTeX, you could use Overleaf, which is a website for it that has these templates like kind of built in, but there's no requirement to do anything. You can just fire up Word and use the default template. Some of the paper ones, like if you're pressed for space, they sometimes give you more content on the page because they'll use dual margins and things like that. But anyways. Okay, plagiarism. So plagiarism is, as you I'm sure all know, is when you basically present ideas as if they're your own, but they aren't actually your own. They came from somewhere else. Okay, so it's important to understand the different forms of plagiarism. And so I'll just give you a couple examples. So the first example would be you find a paper on your topic and you copy and paste, say, a paragraph from it or more, right? And you don't cite it, okay? So that would be a case of plagiarism. Now, let's say that you copy and paste it, but you do cite it, okay? It's still plagiarism because it's not obvious. It's obvious to me that you got the idea from the paper, but it's not obvious to me that you're literally copying the words from the paper, okay? So what you would do to fix it is you would put it in quotes. Okay, so if it's clear, or you would just say in text itself. Another thing is you can write in a very informal, conversational manner. So you don't have to write in a formal manner. So I might say something like, there's this great paper from, maybe that's a little too informal, but I'd say, there's this paper from Benet et al., and they have a really good description of X, right? And then I'd put a colon, I would put a quote, and then I would drop the text in, and then I would end it, and then I would get the reference. Then anyone reading that, that's very clear that this is a direct quote from another paper, and that's fine, okay? Now, another thing that's not okay is, let's say I really like the text, but I know I can't copy and paste it, and I don't want to use a lot of quotes. It looks kind of weird. So what I'll do is I'll just go in and kind of change the grammar, or I might swap out words or things like that. That is still considered plagiarism, okay? Because what you're doing is you're taking the idea and the way that they're expressing the idea, you're copying that, even if you aren't copying the words literally, okay? So it's called mosaic plagiarism, so that's also not allowed, all right? So what I advise you to do is, if you read other material and you like it, take notes, bullet points, that kind of thing, and then when it comes time to write it in your own words, like, just don't have it open. Just write it from memory or write it from the notes that you took, write it in your own words, and then everything should be fine, okay? Plagiarism, the other case would be copying from past years or other students, and that applies to the assignments too. So the assignments need to be done individually, so you can't share. I mean, you can talk about your assignments with other people, and if you trust the other person, you might show them what you wrote, but I can't have assignments coming in with literally the same text as well, okay? And similarly with projects and projects from past years you couldn't replay this year, or projects that you did for another course. You can do it on the same topic. So you might especially, it's actually a good thing. So if you really know about a topic because you've looked at it in other projects, or because you're doing a thesis and it's part of your research or something like that, you should absolutely do a project on the things that you know, right? That it's going to be a better quality project. Just can't be the exact same project. Okay, questions about plagiarism?
So
Yep.
if I do an assignment, I've got time to go through the assignment that you posted.
Yep.
And if I, for example, I looked at the references that you have mentioned, and I found 4 to 5 papers, again, regarding the SOK and everything, and the stride model and everything. For example, if I go through that and I understand that, hey, this is something that I like, and I got the information from that, but I'm not literally answering it like full dot, half dot, or no dot. I'm not answering it directly there, but I got a reference from it.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean? I just got the knowledge from that. Hey, this is how I'm citing it. Something like that.
Yeah, so again, just use a conversational style. Like, you just told me what you want to do, and so you would just write that in the paper. So you might say, like, for background information on how to sign the dots, I relied on these citations.
Yeah, so what I did, what I'm thinking of doing is that I'm going to put a reference or a citation column for that particular answer that I'm going to answer. And I'm going to say that I have got from this particular paper or this particular website or something like that. I got this reference, and this is how I understood. I'm not literally taking the content, but this is what I understood. So this is my version of the answer.
Yep.
Can I do that?
Yeah, 100%. You should do that. So what she said is what you should do. So I'm interested in your understanding of something. I'm not actually interested in, like, it's easy to repeat details. Like, you could read something and I could, like, kind of repeat them back to you, and I don't actually understand them, right? So you have to inject your own understanding of things into it, and you'll see later that there's explicitly marks for doing that type of thing.
So formally, I'm going to cite it and saying that, hey, from this particular paper, I'm going to do this. I'm going to link all the references at the end, obviously, like we do for every assignment and project. I'm going to say that this is how I understand, this is how I am writing, so this is the answer that I'm going to put in. Okay?
Yes,
That's
correct.
what I understood from what he said, and thinking of doing the same. So I just want to know if that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's the right thing to do.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay, no worries. Okay, other questions about plagiarism? Okay, next thing, so generative AI or ChatGPT. Okay, so this is a policy that I'm trying out this year for the first time, and it only applies to my course. So if you try and do this in another course, the professors might not like it, okay? So for this course, as an experiment, you're free to use ChatGPT any way that you want, any generative AI tool in your projects, any way that you want to do it. But there's a couple of constraints. So the first thing I want is basically I want to see a transcript of your conversation about the project. Okay, so if you decide, hey, I do want to use a generative AI tool, then you first off you have to choose one where you can actually get a transcript from it. So ChatGPT has it, for example. It will give you a link, and then I can click on the link and see your actual conversation. The second thing is that all of your conversations about the project you need to do, it actually doesn't matter. If you do them in multiple windows, you can put in multiple links, but it would be cleanest if you did it all in a single window. And so you're not talking about it in multiple places, okay? So try and keep yourself within a single window itself, okay? And then you'll basically just write a paragraph at the end of the paper. And basically, I just want to know, how did you use, what tool did you use? How did you use it? So how you use it might be I asked it, I didn't understand something, so I asked it to explain it to me. I wanted to find papers on a particular topic, so I asked it for those papers. I wrote some bullet points. I wanted to turn it into text, so I asked it to do it for me. I had some text that I wrote. I wanted proofreading and grammar and things like that, so I gave it to him. Okay, so whatever you want, or however you use it, just explain it in a little paragraph, and then have a link to the one or more transcripts that you use. If it's a group project, maybe every group member would have a transcript. Okay. Now, that said, you might be saying, okay, well, what if I say, ChatGPT, write me an HP paper on DNS spoofing, and then I submit that as my project. So your grade is going to depend on you demonstrating that you understand the material. Okay? So if I get the sense that you don't actually understand it, ChatGPT understands it, right, then it's going to hurt your grade. Okay? So you are free to use it, but my promise to you is I won't try and charge you with plagiarism if you literally did that. If you said, give me an 8-page paper and handed it in, you're not going to get charged with plagiarism. You just won't get a very good mark. Okay? So there's no, you don't have to worry about the plagiarism or any of that. You can use it any way you want, but at the end of the day, I want to see that you understand it. Okay? And sometimes you asking in the conversations you have show me that you're getting it, right? Like you didn't understand it and you asked for things and now you get it. Okay? So like I say, this is just for my course. Other courses may do it differently. And one thing I should put in here, I didn't put it in, but I'm going to reserve the right to use your transcripts. I'll anonymize it, but if at some point in the future, a bunch of professors are sitting around talking and there's how do students even use ChatGPT? I may use these as examples, okay? I want to understand how students use it. I know how I use it. I use it a lot. And so I'm just curious above everything too.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's not considered plagiarism?
Yeah, so it won't, my pledge to you is as long as, the only plagiarism would be if I could, I don't know how, but if somehow I knew that you used it and you didn't disclose it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would be plagiarism, but as long as you disclose it, then it's I promise you it's not plagiarism, okay? It might not get you a good mark in demonstrating that you understood the material, but it won't be plagiarism.
That will affect the grade?
Yeah, so if you have a lack of understanding in your project, that will be a component of it, yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how weird our technique is with ChatGPT.
Absolutely, yeah, so prompt engineering.
Ask it explain like a 5-year-old, so.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's actually what I want to see.
Okay.
Yeah, but I will look at it, and so you are revealing your techniques to me. I won't judge you on the techniques, but no, that's the type of thing, I do it all the time. I'm explain it to me like this writer, right? Or I want a textbook explanation, I don't want the academic explanation, or like a 5-year-old, yeah. So no, that's great. The creativity that you show is appreciated.
How can we demonstrate that we understood what ChatGPT says? You would realize it from the next question that we ask you?
Well, it'd be like if you said, just write something for me.
No, other than that.
Well, that would be the main thing, I think, where I would take marks off. I think anything short of that, you are sort of understanding it, right? Or, yeah, if it's more like if you come to it with your ideas and ask it to kind of polish it or tell you things you missed and things like that, it's clear you're sort of initiating the knowledge, and you're using it kind of like a student, like you would say, like, or you come to me and you ask me questions, right? That's the way, like students come and they're like, I'm doing a project on X, I found these 3 papers, do you know any other papers? So that's the kind of thing you could ask ChatGPT, right? But if you ask me, I'm doing a project on this, will you write my introduction for me, right? I'm not going to do that for you, right? So maybe that's actually a good model. You can think of ChatGPT kind of like me. And so like the kinds of things you would ask me to do, but you could ask it to spell check. I wouldn't spell check your document for you, but it would do that for you too. But anyways, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. And because I haven't seen all the transcripts yet, I'm not sure exactly myself, but I'll try and figure it out. Yeah. Okay, other questions? Yeah.
I just have a suggestion. Instead of putting the transcript in the document itself, could we just make it like a zip file where we put the transcripts in a different document?
Yeah, okay. So, sorry, to be clear, I do not want the transcript in the PDF. Okay, I just want a link. And when I click on the link, I see the transcript. And so if that's a PDF that's on Dropbox, or if it's actually ChatGPT's interface, that's fine. It doesn't matter what it looks like.
Drop a message in the Moodle with that student ID?
No, like put it in the report itself. Otherwise, when I go to mark it, I don't want to have to look through messages and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So find a place to upload it, and then
2 different documents?
yeah. So I guess I could accept them on Moodle. Anyways, whatever. Just use ChatGPT. It's the best, anyways. I didn't say that. And it gives you the transcript. It will give you a link. And then I also know that you didn't modify the PDF or anything like that too. Yeah. So that's my advice to you. But if you really, really want to do something else, clear it with me and it should be okay. All right. Okay, I'll go through some other tips. Okay, so what I don't want is like a survey. So a survey, okay, first off, let me back up a bit. You pick a topic, that's fine. Now you have to go and find some other people who have explained the topic so that you can understand it, probably, okay? And so to do that, you're going to look on the web, you're going to read blog posts and that type of thing. One thing I would like, because it's a university, is I'd like you to consider the academic literature, okay? So go to scholar.google.com, put in some search terms or ask ChatGPT, whatever, try and find some academic papers that are relevant. If you cannot find any because you're doing such a cutting edge thing and academia is like 6 months behind or 12 months behind, that's great, okay? So it's not a strict requirement, okay? But if you're doing something, you have no academic research cited at all, and I know that there's 1 million papers on that topic, then that's where I won't like it, okay? So make sure that you just double check the academic literature and find whatever is relevant, okay? Now, let's say you find 5 papers that you think are good that are exactly on your topic, okay? There's 2 kinds of papers you could do for your report, okay? One paper is like, I found 5 papers. Paper 1 says this. Paper 2 says this. Paper 3 says this. That's what I call a survey, okay? And that's what I don't want you to do, okay? I don't want like a summary of all the papers, okay? I don't want a project that's structured that way, okay? Instead, you could write a paper that's just like, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about X, right? And then you'll just tell me everything I need to know about X. And then in the middle of that, because you're pulling knowledge from these 5 papers, there's going to be citations to those 5 papers, okay? That's what I want, okay? So I want something that's more like, think of it like you're writing a textbook for your peers. The other thing is you don't have to write it for me as a professor, okay? Assume I know, like, whatever. I have a CS background, whatever. I know basics. You don't have to write it like a 5-year-old. But at the same time, you don't have to write it, like, try not to write it for, like, an expert in the field. Try and write it for, like, someone else in the class as kind of like a textbook, like the textbook chapter on this topic that you would like to pick up and read in order to understand it yourself, okay? So that's what I call a systemization of knowledge as opposed to a survey itself. Okay, another tip is just if you're not getting the difference, pretend I've already read the 5 papers. So you have 5 papers that you want to cite. If I already read them, then there's no point in you giving me a summary of all 5 of them because I already read them. Okay, tell me something new, or tell me the big picture of these 5 papers rather than one particular paper. Okay, I'm also interested in how you understand the paper. You can also be honest with me. This also goes with the conversational style. You can write, hey, like, next they propose this cryptographic protocol, and I don't really understand it. It's a lot of discrete math and whatever. Like, I couldn't tell you what these equations mean, but this is what I understood is the big picture, right? Like, you have a box, and like these values go in, and the thing that comes out is a signature, right? How that happens or why it's secure, I'm not sure. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so you can you don't have to fake understanding things that you don't understand. In fact, it's better for you not to try and think them. You can also think about papers critically. So when people write papers or any article, blog posts, they often have a self-interest. They're trying to promote them. They're trying to make it seem more novel than it is. They're trying to make it seem better, that it solves all the problems, it doesn't have any weaknesses and things like that. So first off, some things will actually be wrong, okay? Even academic papers, okay? It's possible that there's academic papers that are wrong. And especially on like Google Scholar doesn't really differentiate between like a paper that I write and I just post on an online repository and nobody checked it, versus one that's published in one of the like most competitive, strongest peer-reviewed venues, okay? It will show you those 2 papers side by side, okay? And there's no good way for you, unless if you are a professor or something like that, to know the difference. So I don't expect it. One thing you could look at is like citation counts and things like that. If you see something with 100 or 200 citations, then it's probably a good paper. And if it doesn't have a lot, that could also just be because it's new, because citations also take a while. But if you see a paper that's 5 years old, 10 years old, and it only has 2 citations, and when you click on it, it's just the same authors citing themselves, then that might be an indication that it's not good. Again, it doesn't mean for sure that it's not good, but at least you could be skeptical of it. Okay, so you can... so you don't have to use academic papers. You get the knowledge where you get it. Wherever it is, that's where you're going to get it from. And depending on the topic, there might be a lot in academic papers, there might not be a lot. But you are responsible for at least checking to see if there's relevant academic papers. This is more or less what I just said. When you're describing work of others, think about it critically. So you can compare and contrast between different people's approaches. You can be skeptical of what people have wrote. Authors sometimes miss things. Sometimes they just leave things out, or they underplay their weaknesses and things like that. Okay, topics. So what should you do your paper on? Actually, I think I have a point somewhere. Okay, let me go to point 9 first. Choosing a project topic is actually hard, and it's supposed to be hard. If you're saying they're struggling to come up with a good project topic, that's part of the project itself, okay? You can think of maybe like 20% of the project is just coming up with a good topic, okay? So you should struggle with it. That said, you can try and be creative. You can try and think about, like, security applies to lots of things. It probably applies to a lot of things that you're just interested in that have nothing to do with security, right? Like, I like soccer, right? Is there any security considerations with soccer? Like there probably are, right? Or, you like video games or movies or music or whatever. Like, you can find security everywhere, okay? So you can align. And a project that's like fun is easier to work on with a good topic. Now, if you're stuck with finding a topic, another thing you could do is you could see, well, what are other people writing papers on? Okay, so I listed the 4 biggest security conferences. Each of these publish hundreds of papers a year. And so, like, even if you looked at the papers in 2024, you would have 500 papers, like between the 4 conferences or more to look through. But obviously you're not going to look through all of the papers. But what you could do is at least read the titles of all of them. right? And then if a particular title grabs you, then you could read what's called the abstract, which is usually a 1-paragraph summary. And then if you find some abstracts that are interesting, then you might look at the actual papers themselves, okay? So you can also, anyways, you can use it just to like see the kinds of topics. And sometimes you'll see like things that are interesting to you that you never thought, like I never thought about, I don't know, security of vehicles. That's probably something you have thought about or whatever. But sometimes you see the application of security to unusual domains that you didn't expect, and then it becomes interesting. There's lots of other conferences beyond those, but that's just one to get started. Once you have a toehold, in the sense that, like, say you find one paper that's exactly what you want, then it's very easy to spread that out into multiple things, okay? First off, every paper has a related work or a literature review in it. So it will tell you all the papers that are relevant to it up to the date it was published, okay? And then if you go on Google Scholar, you can see every paper since it was published that cited it. Okay, so that will give you a list of papers that, some of them are like follow-up work, some of them, it might just be like a sentence in the paper that's just a citation that it's not really a follow-up to it, but you can at least go through the titles of the things that you see on Google Scholar, okay? So once you find one paper, then you can rewind in time from the paper itself and find all the papers that led up to it, and then you can fast forward in time with Google Scholar to see all the papers that are using that paper. Okay, these, maybe I should reorder them because they're kind of in random order. Okay, another thing is, what about like, okay, when you tell me the project, who's in your team and what your project topic is, and the answer is you don't tell me anything, okay? So whenever the project is due, you hand in a PDF and that's it, okay? We don't have to talk about it. It may be that multiple people or teams in the room do the same project. That's fine as well. Usually, I could literally give you an assignment. I could assign a project to all of you, and it would be the same thing, but you would all come up with different reports because everyone looks at things from different angles. Okay. Now that said, it's not that I don't want to hear from you. Okay. So if you have questions about it, ask me after class or shoot me an email, and I'm happy to discuss it. I won't pick a project topic for you. Okay. But if you do have a project topic, I can help you kind of narrow it. Or usually that's the thing. Usually students, that's another thing, maybe a general piece of advice I'll give you, is students will choose projects that are really way too broad. They'll be like, I want to do security of smartphones, and I'm going to compare Android to iOS, right? And like there's so many, like what does that mean? Like, are you talking about the kernel? Are you talking about the app stores? Are you talking about the browser? Are you talking about this or that? Like you could write an entire 600-page textbook on comparing the two. Are you talking about the hardware? And so what I'll always encourage you to do is narrow, narrow, narrow. Okay? It's much better to do a deep dive. Try and pick the narrowest possible topic itself. Okay? And then do a deep dive on that particular topic. Okay, another thing that usually works, I think it's a good idea, not all students do it, but I'll encourage you to think about it, is you can try and phrase the title of your project as a question. Okay, like what's better, iOS or Android? So again, that's not a good topic, but now it's a question, and because it's a question, it helps you figure out what you should include in the report, which is basically anything that helps you answer the question. Okay, so I don't need like random side details about other stuff that isn't directly relevant to answering the question. Okay, so if it doesn't help you answer the question, then you don't have to include it. And if it helps answer the question or its background needed to understand the answer to the question, then you can include it. Okay, and it doesn't have to be one question either. It might be a small cluster of questions that are similar. References, any format is fine. Usually you're going to copy and paste them from Google Scholar or something anyways. One thing I highly recommend you do not do is ask ChatGPT for references, because it will hallucinate things. It will make up papers that don't exist, or they'll tell you a paper that does exist, but they'll add random authors to the paper. So I've had students of my own, graduate students, who publish things with like references that are like hallucinated by ChatGPT. So that's one thing that isn't great. But the easiest thing would be if it's an academic paper, just go to Google Scholar. There'll be a cite button, and then it will give you the citation and text. You can just copy and paste it. Or if you're using LaTeX, it'll give you the BibTeX. But basically, the rule is as long as I can look at it and figure out what you're citing, then it's fine. Okay. Okay. Another thing is you will see some methodologies in class, obviously. And in particular, like the first couple weeks, you'll see a couple, like one called Stride, one called Evaluation Frameworks, one called Attack Trees. And sometimes students think, I need to put an evaluation framework in my paper, in my project, and you don't need that at all. Okay, so the only thing that you need to qualify as a project for this course is just that you tell me what security means and you tell me how do you figure out whether something is secure or not. Okay, as long as that's covered somewhere in the project, then it qualifies as security evaluation. Okay, you don't need to actually use something from class. Another thing that students will do is sometimes they might like work in like groups of 3. And they'll be like, okay, you do the attack tree, I'll do the evaluation framework. It's usually a bad idea to use different methodologies on the same thing. It would be much better to do like one very thorough attack tree, right, than to do an attack tree plus an evaluation framework. And usually they don't glue together well. I know you don't know what these things are yet, but just keep that in mind. Okay, so that's not a good way to split up the project at all. I would rather have one deep dive on one narrow thing using one narrow methodology than anything else. Okay, these are some of the grading criteria that I think about when I'm grading. Okay, so scope and execution is just that it's clear what your report is about. Like I read the first paragraph, I know, okay, this is a report. Again, if it's a question, I know what it's about just from the title. It's going to be about answering this question, okay? But sometimes it's like, I'm going to talk about, I'll just keep going with the Android thing. I'm going to talk about Android, but then it's like, okay, what are you, like I have to read halfway through, and now all of a sudden you're talking about the kernel, and then later you're talking about permissions, and like it's just sort of, because you read a paper about the kernel and you read a paper about permissions, right? And so you want like a clear, logical flow through your paper. It makes sense. Why is that here? Why is that after this? All that type of stuff needs to be well conceived. Yeah, topics that are like really old, like, I don't know, like what's better, WEP or WPA? Like those are projects that like I could have got 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I'm not a big fan of those. Okay, so try and do something that's a little more modern. Ask yourself, like, could I have written this project 10 years ago? 10 years isn't that long ago. That's probably okay. But if you could have wrote the project 20 years ago, then, and you're not citing any papers like from the 2020s or the late 2000s, then it's probably like kind of old and stale. Okay, logical flow I mentioned, and there's a reason why each portion of the paper exists. It should be complete, so you shouldn't miss things. If you tell me you're going to tell me everything I need to know about X, there shouldn't be like large gaps in it. Okay, interpretation is sort of what I was talking about before. I'm basically going to try and figure out whether you understand what you're saying. I can't really tell you how I do it because it's like hard to write down. I've just read projects for 10, 15 years, and you just get a sense, like you sort of know, like, okay, they're just repeating math equations and they have no idea what they mean. Usually because maybe there's like symbols that aren't introduced, or they say things that are slightly wrong or things like that. Or this person's like, they're really simplifying it and they're really telling it in a way that I know that they understand it because it's kind of like a unique way of describing it, or I can tell because they're not missing any details, like it's a complete thing, or they're thinking about like, I just told you this, but you're probably wondering this. So this is this, you can sort of understand it, okay? So the point for your projects is really understand what you're doing. Try not to just repeat things that you read that you don't understand, okay? Because you probably won't repeat it well in my experience. The other thing I mentioned is you can also oh yeah, another thing that papers do is sometimes they're very light on detail, like it's very vague, and then there's like it goes like really deep into like this is the exact math like used for this one like little thing, and then it kind of goes back to like being vague again. So that's another indication too, like the level of detail is like kind of varying a bit. So you should, yeah. Okay, technicality means that, I mean, this is a graduate course, so I expect some technical level, but technical means different things. So like if you're doing math, it means one thing. If you're doing code, it means another thing. If you're just describing things, what technicality means basically is you don't shy away from the details. Sometimes things are complicated to explain. You don't try and gloss it over. You're like, okay, we got to go through this material. Yes, it's complicated, but I am going to explain it to you, and I'm going to explain it to you the best that I can. Okay? And so you're precise, you don't skip steps, you aren't vague. That's what technicality means for like just a paper that's describing how something works. Okay? So you consider all the different things that you should consider.
So, when it comes to technicality,
Yep.
do you expect any threat model or a framework to work to see in the particular project, or
Okay, so first off, there is no one thing that I expect. So I'm not like you have to have Stride or you have to have an evaluation framework. So different projects will do different things. And a lot of it's due to the topic that you choose. Like the topics will be so different that there is no one thing that will work for all the different things that you could do. That's something we'll get into in the lecture itself. But so I definitely don't expect one particular thing. What I just expect from you is that when you explain what security means, you do it in a way that's consistent with what other people are doing. So other academics that are writing better, people writing blog posts or whatever it is, they have a way that they conceive of security. And so you're explaining it in a way that's consistent. Yeah. And you can even say, this is how other people conceive of it, right? And that's not to say you can't criticize it. If you disagree with it or you think there's a better way, tell me. That's fine too. But first tell me like how other people do it, and then you can tell me why you think where it could be improved. But I don't even require that. I want to know what the way other people do it. And so if they use a particular framework or something like that, then you should. But if they're not using a framework, then you don't have to either.
okay, so what exactly, another thing that I have in mind is if you are evaluating, for example, blockchain, for
Mhm.
example, in that particular model, are we evaluating the vulnerabilities of smart contracts, for example? Do you expect like the vulnerabilities, threats, or any attacks are there on a particular model, something like that? Or
Yeah,
it's
okay.
we can, that the privilege and everything is up to us.
Okay, so we'll use an example of blockchain. I teach a course on blockchain, so if some of you have taken it, I know. But if you don't know what it is, it doesn't really matter. It's the thing that underlies Bitcoin. Okay, so blockchain is a good example of something that's way too broad. You couldn't do a project on blockchain because there's so many different things, yeah? So then you go to like smart contracts, which is the code, but even that is like really broad. And even if you go into vulnerabilities, you realize that, first off, they can happen at different layers. It could happen in the contract. It could be the user interface that sits on top. Yeah. So then you might narrow it down, and you might even narrow it to one vulnerability. Like I'm looking at this one particular vulnerability, and I'm going to tell you everything about this one particular. Yeah. And so that's what I would do is narrow. And then in that case, you might say, well, the appropriate thing is like, could like a static analysis find this vulnerability or something? Like that might be the way that you sort of describe how you tell whether something's secure because it's relevant to that particular thing. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, the last thing is just sort of the manuscript. So not a lot of marks. I'm not picky really about anything. But the writing should be good. You can use ChatGPT to improve it. You should organize the paper well. So there's no sometimes students are like, do I need introduction or what do I do? My advice is just, you can do whatever you want, but take a look at academic papers. They usually always do it a certain way, not down to the letter, but roughly there's some introduction, there's some background, and then they kind of go through the results. And if there's more than one result, they're in its own section and things like that. So you can use it as kind of a rough guide. But the point is that it's sort of logical. If you can use a graphic to explain something, you should do it, okay? On the other hand, you shouldn't just put graphics in for the sake of graphics, right? If I can replace your graphic with a sentence, then you should use the sentence itself, okay? You should also do the graphics yourself. Even if you find a graphic that's exactly, first off, you can't copy and paste out of another paper. You could copy and paste with a citation. So you could say, okay, I took this graphic from this paper. That's fine. It's not plagiarism. But it's still not great because the way that you're using the graphic and the way the author is using it is probably slightly different. Or maybe the words that you use to label things would be slightly different. So it would be better for you to say, okay, here's a graphic. I made it. It is adapted from this other paper. So like I didn't invent the concept of this graphic. Like I'm adapting this other graphic, but I am making it my own. Okay, I'm changing the words so it's consistent with the words that I'm using in my report, or these modules aren't so important to me, so I'm taking them out, or I'm just replacing them with a big box or whatever. That would make me very happy to see that you put that level of effort into it. Citations you should use them appropriate. Another thing is don't be scared to cite too much. Okay, some papers that I read, especially in this SOK category, it's literally like sentence citation, sentence citation, sentence citation. Okay, so if all your, the next 10 sentences are coming directly from citations, then you should have 10 citations. Okay, it's not bad. I don't think that you're not thinking for yourself. When you cite, I know that you read the paper, you understood it. You're not quoting the paper, you're telling me in your own words, so you're demonstrating understandability. And of course, you had to learn this stuff somewhere, right? You probably didn't wake up and already know all the details of contract vulnerabilities, right? Like you had to read it somewhere. So of course there should be tons and tons of citations, okay? So there's no downside to citing too much. What else? Adequate work is just more like if there's 4 people, I expect more than if there's 1 person, which is also mentioned here. And, it's sort of like, it doesn't look like an assignment. Like this is worth more percentage of your mark than an assignment. So like I expect like a certain level. It doesn't look like something you started the day before. Okay, so that's everything. That took a long time, but are there questions about the project?
I have a question.
Yeah.
You said the content should be 8 pages.
Yes.
What if I choose the conference paper that has like 2 columns? So how long should it be?
8 pages. So yeah. So you can squeeze a few extra pages by like using the conference template or whatever. But yeah, 8 is like a very soft deadline. Like for some people, 8 pages is not going to be a lot of words. I could make it like a word count and stuff. It's just easier to count. And I don't really care that it's exactly 8. It's more just about having some sort of bound on it so that people don't write 20 pages or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. So 8 in any reasonable format is fine. And again, if you have 10 pages and you're like, should I put it in the conference format so it could be 8? Or should I just email Jeremy and ask him, can I have 10 pages instead? Just email me and I'll say you can have 10. Especially if you're like, I'm just using Word, I'm not using some fancy template, then it's fine. There was another question, yeah.
If I have a topic that I don't have a certain answer, ultimately it's maybe too hard for me, but I write down the process and my thoughts about this topic. Is that okay?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, so you can try and fail. So sometimes people are like, I want to do a project and this is my idea for it. And then you talk about like what you tried to do and basically why did it work? What was the roadblocks? Do you think it's just like a personal thing, like someone else could solve it, but I can't? Or do you think like it's unsolvable? Like give me your thoughts on that, and that's fine as a project too. Yeah. Yeah, so be ambitious, and if you fail, it's fine. Write up your failure. That's fine. Other questions? Okay, great. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break. If you think of other things when we come back, you can ask them. And then we'll go into the first lecture after that.